Hello again everybody, so today I'm back and today it's time for another top 5. So I was kind of looking at my bookshelves and racking my brain for what I could do a top 5 on. Got a few kind of things floating around and then had an inspiration moment. Today's top 5 is top 5 books that are older than me. So by that I just mean books that were published before 1993, which is the year I was born. So I've had a look through the books I've got on my shelf, the books I've read when I was younger, and found a good list of books that are just that little bit older than me and make me feel like a spring chicken still. It's quite an interesting selection across different genres, books I've read recently, books I read 20 years ago, just a really interesting mixture of stuff, and I'm going to get straight down to it by starting off with Hiroshima by John Hersey. So this edition was re-released last year, but basically this is a book, well, it's actually a series of journalistic articles published shortly after the Second World War. So it follows 5 or 6 people, 3, 2, 1. So it follows 5 or 6 people who were in Hiroshima when the bombing occurred, and it's a story of what they did in the immediate aftermath, how they responded, rescuing people, helping people, trying to survive, etc., through to following them on a couple of years later down the line to see how they're doing, and it's just the most amazing piece of journalism. It's really graphic in parts about how it talks about the injuries caused, the effect it's had on people. It's a really amazing story about humanity and how people band together in this kind of situation, and it just feels like it's a really fitting tribute to the whole event, and it's a really moving thing to read. Very, very old now actually, it's getting on for 70 years old, far before I was born, but I think it's a piece of journalism that's still really relevant and really, really worth a read today. The next book I'm going to talk about then is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So I've mentioned this a few times as one of my favourite books ever since I studied it for A-level. It's amazing that a book I studied has actually stuck around as one of my favourites, but I've always enjoyed it a lot. Really excited to reread it again soon. And this was definitely published quite a lot before I was born. And it's just a really powerful, moody, atmospheric novel. It doesn't feel dated, even though it was published a long time ago. And it really is a joy to read, and is, and probably will remain, one of my favourite books ever. Carrying on with the theme of books that I don't actually have with me, the next one is a slightly more interesting one. This is a bit of a niche book, but when you find someone else that's read this book in this series, it is one of the most exciting things that can happen. And this is a series called the Redwall series by Brian Jacks. So, at the time when I was reading them, I would have been 8, 9, 10. They're basically a series of books about the adventures and dynamics of woodland animals. Looking back, as a slightly more adult person, they are actually books that feel like a childish version of Game of Thrones. So it's all animals murdering each other at war, political intrigue and backstabbing, bits of racism, gender stereotypes, literally covers everything in a children's book. But they are amazing. There were probably 30, 40 books published in this series, most of which are actually out of print now. But the first one, Redwall, has just been redone, and they are just such clever books. I always look back with fondness at them. I will know for a fact I will reread the ones I've got at some point in the not too distant future. And they are one of the series that probably defined my reading habits. They were probably some of the first kind of fantasy style books I read when I was 8, 9-ish. And they definitely are part of why I still read a lot of that genre today. Absolutely brilliant. If you've not read them, go and read them. You will still enjoy them regardless of how old you are now. But maybe don't read them when you're 8 because they are a little bit more unsuitable than I thought at the time. While we're talking about children's books, number 4 is The Magic Faraway Tree by Enid Blyton. So this is a series that I read numerous times when I was younger, and literally if anyone ever asks for a book for a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, this is what I recommend, because they are literally so magical. They create a really interesting cast of characters, they're really funny, they're really amazing stories, there's really amazing morals to them, they're really well written. I can't say enough good things about Enid Blyton, and especially this series. I think it's one that everyone should have read. If you haven't, when you have kids, read it to your kids so you get to read it too, because they are genuinely some of the best books ever written. So the last book on today's list then is one that I absolutely adored and was published again a little bit before I was born. It's been redone a million times since, and I've read it 2 or 3 times over the past few years alone. The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. So the Discworld series is basically a genre of its own now. It's kind of the epitome of funny fantasy, and it combines so many hilarious little poking fun at things like Conan the Barbarian's character, and just a whole ton of things that makes it really, really fascinating, really interesting, and still so enjoyable today. These editions particularly are amazing, and I've started reading, like I say, quite a few of them in the past 6 or 7 months or so, since Terry Pratchett sadly died, and they are just an amazing series. Again, published a lot before I was born, but doesn't feel like it's dated at all, feels like it could be brand new, and it's an absolute joy. So there you have it, the top 5 books older than me. All of those actually quite a lot older than me. There aren't that many that were published like in the early 90s or late 80s. They're all quite old, especially Wuthering Heights, which is quite refreshing to see. I didn't think it'd go like that. But it's just to show that there are so many good new books coming out, but it doesn't mean you should skimp on reading the older ones, because they are some of my favourite books I've read. That's it for today then. Thank you so much for watching. I'm hoping to do more top 5s in the next few weeks or so. I've got quite a lot of things floating around, and if you've got any suggestions for top 5s you'd like to see, please let me know. There's a ton of really interesting stuff that my brain won't even think of that you guys can suggest. And if you could leave a comment, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff, that's really appreciated. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again with my next video.